My first 3-year tour in the Army, and I was in Air Defense Artillery, and they shipped us over to Germany. And Air Defense Artillery, we had Nike Hercules missile systems, and we ended up being a custodial unit and stuff. So we were responsible for the accountability and security of nuclear warheads that could be fired on those missiles. And after about 2 years down there, we was nothing but a glorified security guard out there. And I went up and told my first sergeant one day, I said, if you don't find me something to do, I'm gonna start throwing rocks at these things. Well, they flagged my security clearance and throwed me in the mess hall. I'm James Davis, go by Sarge at the restaurant. I am originally from north of here at Jackson County, a little town called Newport, Arkansas. We opened in August of 2000 in Little Rock, Arkansas. Today we've got 15 or 16 restaurants with our name on it. And some of them are company owned, some of them are licensed operations, some of them are franchise operations. And they're scattered from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Yonkers, New York. When you open a restaurant and you open the doors and you get the public to start coming in, and you're out there walking around through the dining room and stuff, and you've got people coming up and saying, man, this is the best stuff I've ever eaten, then that just gives you that much more motivation to do better. If you come back and you tell me that's great stuff and everything, then that's made my days. And Monday morning about 10:30, we were doing Salisbury steak. I'll never forget that one. Salisbury steak, and about 10:30 in the morning, the first sergeant called the second cook out. And about 10 minutes later, he come back and he was crying uncontrollably. And I thought, my God, what did he do? And then they called me out. And I said, well, I didn't do anything, Well, the second cook's father had a massive heart attack in New Jersey, and he was going home on an emergency leave. And they gave me the keys to that mess hall. So we were feeding about 50 men out of that detachment. And I'd come from a large family in Arkansas, but not 50 people and stuff. But I started feeding 50 men from that morning on. And so I had to learn how to requisition food, how much food to requisition, how to cook, and how to change recipes, because the Army Tech Manual, the recipes written up on 100 portion servings and stuff. So I had to break that down, learning how to requisition and how to forecast how much food to cook for the next day based on the way the military, the Army at that time, tracked their rations and stuff, is helped me determine and train my pit masters back there how much food that they need to forecast for the next day and the next day and the next day. So that part right there helped us make the restaurant deal a whole lot easier. So that part of the military training, 20 years later, helped us launch the Whole Hog Cafe. Barbecue for me growing up, that was the craziest thing. We grew up on a farm in Jackson County, Arkansas, and every year the John Deere dealership, biggest business in town, taking care of all the farmers, they would have a big barbecue, and they'd get a big hog out there and they'd cook that hog overnight, and they didn't have a clue. And it was the worst tasting barbecue. And I thought, I ain't never gonna eat no more of this stuff. And my next introduction to barbecue was in Georgia, believe it or not. Was in Georgia, outside of Augusta. And it was better than the farm. It was better than the farm deal was, but still, it had a long way to go. And then after I retired, I got introduced into the Memphis-in-May cooking circuit out there, and I got to sampling some of the barbecue that those guys that cooked and stuff. And I thought, well, this is something I can do right here. So the biggest one has been the first place whole hog in the Memphis-in-May World Championship at Memphis, Tennessee. And we've had 2 runner-ups, 2 second-place finishes at Memphis-in-May, cooking ribs up there, but Whole Hog is the best one, first place, the Whole Hog. We haven't won the grand champion yet, but we're still working on it. Well, you gotta be determined for one thing, and then you've got to do a lot of practice. Practice, keep notes, try different things, see what works, see what don't work, and then put all that information together and then start putting a timetable to it, because when you cook in a championship barbecue circuit, you've got a certain time that you've got to have this stuff cooked and turned in. So you want your final product to be ready and righteous at the time that they want to eat it. We'd been cooking mostly ribs and stuff at that time. So it was probably 8 or 9 years down the road before we switched into cooking whole hog, and that's when we won the first place whole hog title. Anyway, I got the trophy over there. It's on there. Oh, good God! When we first started doing this, we was going out about once a month, and we did that for years. So probably been out 120 to 150 times, more or less. Well, it all starts out, you got to get there and get checked in. And when you get checked in, you set up your area and get it presentable. You usually get your meat checked in on Friday morning at 8 o'clock. So at Friday morning at 8 o'clock, some judge will come by and see that you got your meat properly cooled, and then after they check you in at 8 o'clock, then you can start prepping it, seasoning it, marinating it, doing whatever you're gonna do to it and stuff. And then the judging will be on Saturday. So Friday morning, from the time that you get checked in, you do your final setup on your rig and stuff. You do all your prep work on your meat that you're gonna cook, whether it be ribs, shoulder, or hog. And if it's a whole hog, you want to get all that prep work done and get that hog ready to go on the smoker by noon on Friday. And you're going to cook that thing from noon Friday until 10 o'clock Saturday morning, and that's when you're going to present it to the judges. Now that I've gotten older and stuff, I go with the ribs because I got more time to spend on prep, and I don't have to get up early in the morning. I don't have to stay up all night to cook and all that other stuff. So I can get up Saturday morning at 6 o'clock and have ribs ready to turn in by 11 o'clock Saturday morning. I think probably the most critical part about starting a restaurant is learning how to manage your money and your finances and stuff. As you go, try to put your money back into the restaurant, and if you're not having to battle your finances and stuff all the time, the rest of the restaurant is easier to manage and stuff. It's something that you can do in your back room or on your back porch, cook your own barbecue, so you can come out to a restaurant and see what they're doing, and then try to go back and duplicate that on your own. And it's good for holidays and stuff. And if you can go out and you can really get some really great barbecue and have a great barbecue experience, and then have a chance to visit with the pit masters and stuff that runs these different restaurants and stuff, and get a little insight from them. If you can go out there and successfully do it, then you want to try to do it better for your family and friends and guests and stuff. So in Arkansas, where does it feed it? It's kind of like a Memphis style, but we call it sweet and sassy. Sweet and sassy is where your sauce, it gives you a little kick. First you taste the sweetness of it and everything, and then as it gets back on the back of your palate and everything, it gives you a little kick from the heat that you've got in there. So that's where we call the sweet and sassy at. One thing that you shouldn't do when cooking barbecue is start your charcoal or your wood fire or anything like that using any type of lighter fluids and stuff like that. Start it with a blowtorch or something like that. Another thing you don't want to do is when you start cooking your barbecue, you do not want to put any sauce on it. You dry rub it, you marinate it, you do whatever you want to do, but do not use anything that has sugar in it in the beginning of the cooking stage and stuff. Put it on later into the cooking process, or else it's going to turn about as dark as this table is right here, or darker. And I guess the thing that you want to do is time it so that you can cook it low and slow. You want to cook in the beginning until you learn the ropes about it and everything. You want to start cooking at about 240 to 250 degrees and know, what temperature the meat is done at. Different meats, you cook to different temperatures and stuff. Usually in the pork and the beef category, we cook to about 200 degrees, plus or minus a little bit. Each cook has his own opinion about that. But you want to cook it long enough that it breaks down and gets tender, and you don't get too much smoke in it, so you don't want to use a whole lot of firewood in it, but you do want to use some firewood to generate the right amount of smoke to give you that smoke flavor to complement the spices and herbs and everything that you did to the meat to get to that point. Go to wholehogcafe.com to find the closest Whole Hog Cafe restaurant to you.
Fulcrum 1, ready 9 line. 133 NA, 25 feet, vehicles in the open.